Long before there were oceans or skies, long before the first light touched the surface of a world, there was only silence. The universe was young then, only a few billion years old, and it shimmered with clouds of gas and dust left behind by ancient stars. Those stars had lived and died long before our world existed, scattering the elements that would one day form mountains, oceans, and life itself. Iron, carbon, oxygen, and gold drifted endlessly through the dark, pulled and pushed by invisible tides of gravity. It was from this cosmic dust, this quiet sea of stardust, that our story began. Far away, in a corner of a spiral galaxy, one of those clouds began to collapse. Something, a passing star, perhaps, disturbed the balance, and gravity took hold. The cloud began to swirl, spinning faster as it shrank, glowing with the heat of its own making. At the center, a sphere of fire was born, a new star, fierce and bright. Around it, in the glow of its first light, smaller fragments of dust and rock began to gather, colliding and fusing into larger bodies. These were the seeds of planets, still molten and wild. One of these fiery infants would one day become Earth. But Earth, in her beginning, was not the gentle blue world we know now. She was a furnace, her surface glowing red, her air thick with smoke and metal vapor. The sky rained fire, and meteors fell without end, striking her surface and reshaping her form. Mountains rose and melted again, craters filled with lava, the air was poison, carbon dioxide, sulfur, ammonia. The young Earth was alive only with storms and flame. Yet even in that chaos, something miraculous was happening. She was cooling. Deep within her molten heart, heavy metals sank downward, forming a dense core of iron and nickel. Around it, lighter rocks floated, forming the mantle and crust. Volcanoes roared across her surface, spilling rivers of molten stone. Each eruption released clouds of gas, water vapor, nitrogen, carbon dioxide. Slowly, over millions of years, these gases wrapped the planet in a fragile blanket of atmosphere. There was no oxygen yet, no breath for life, but the stage was being set. Then came the rain. For thousands of years, lightning cracked through black skies, and thunder rolled across the newborn continents. Clouds formed, heavy and full, and the heavens opened. The first raindrops hissed as they struck the molten ground, turning to steam and rising again, only to fall once more. It rained not for days, not for centuries, but for millions of years. Every drop carried a promise. Slowly, patiently, the hot crust cooled, and the water began to gather in the planet's low places. The first oceans were born, vast and dark, stretching beneath a red, alien sun. In those ancient seas, the world began to reflect light for the first time. The oceans shimmered under volcanic skies, their surfaces trembling with wind. Beneath the waves, chemical reactions danced in secret, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, sulfur, all mixing in the warm, mineral-rich depths. Lightning flashed across the skies, striking the waters, creating bursts of energy that rearranged simple molecules into complex ones. It was chemistry on a grand scale, and within it lay the seeds of life. The Earth spun faster then, its days only a few hours long. The moon, much closer than today, loomed large and golden in the sky, pulling the tides with incredible force. Each tide stirred the oceans, mixing their contents like a great cauldron. And somewhere, perhaps near a volcanic vent on the ocean floor, or within a shallow tide pool warmed by the sun, something extraordinary began to take shape. Molecules joined together, formed fragile membranes, and began to copy themselves. It was not yet life as we understand it, but it was the beginning of memory, the start of evolution. The world changed slowly. The air remained thick with volcanic gases, and the continents shifted beneath restless seas. Yet even as the planet trembled and burned, it carried within its waters the quiet pulse of possibility. Every storm, every flash of lightning, every wave that crashed against the shore contributed to the same silent experiment. The laws of physics and chemistry, eternal and impartial, were writing the first lines of the story that would one day include you and me. Time, in those ages, was almost infinite. Millions of years passed like seconds. The oceans darkened with minerals, the sky began to clear, and the sun, now steady and strong, warmed the surface with gentle light. The Earth had found a kind of balance. The violence of her birth was fading, replaced by rhythm, the rhythm of tides, of wind, of night and day. Beneath her surface, her molten heart still beat, keeping her alive. And somewhere, hidden deep beneath the waves, tiny chemical whispers continued their dance. No eyes saw it, no mind imagined it, but something was beginning. A spark flickered in the darkness, not a flame, but a pattern, a structure capable of change. The first precursor to life had formed. Billions of years later, we would give it names, molecules, amino acids, RNA, but in that moment, it was simply the universe becoming aware of itself, in the smallest, simplest way possible. The long sleep of stone and fire was over. The earth had begun to dream. In the quiet depths of those primeval oceans, beneath the flicker of lightning and the whisper of volcanic heat, something invisible stirred. It was small beyond imagining, just a fragile collection of molecules, held together by chance and persistence. But within that fragile structure was a secret more powerful than fire or stone, the ability to copy itself. One molecule made another like it, and then another, and another. It was a pattern, a rhythm, a kind of music written in chemistry. That was the first breath of life, not a creature, not yet, but the beginning of a story that would one day fill the world with forests, oceans, and human dreams. At first, the world remained silent. The sun shone dimly through thick clouds, and the air was still unfit for breathing. The oceans were warm, thick with minerals, shimmering with microscopic promise. In that alien water, tiny cells began to form, soft bubbles of fat enclosing delicate strands of genetic material. They drifted in the currents like seeds on a breeze, dividing and joining, endlessly reshaping themselves. Some failed and dissolved back into the sea, but others survived, adapting, learning in the only way life knows, through change. There was no plan, no intention, only endless repetition. Molecules that survived became more common, those that didn't simply vanished. Slowly, over millions of years, this ceaseless cycle gave rise to more stable forms, tiny cells that could store energy, sense their surroundings, and repair themselves. They fed on simple chemicals, drawing power from the heat of the earth or the glow of the young sun. They were alive in the simplest, purest sense, small engines of persistence. Then, somewhere deep in the ancient sea, a transformation occurred that would alter the planet forever. Some of these early microbes learned to capture sunlight. Using its energy, they began to create food from water and carbon dioxide, releasing a strange, deadly byproduct, oxygen. It was a poison to most of the early life forms, but the oxygen kept flowing, rising from the seas into the skies. Over eons, the thick haze that once shrouded the planet began to fade. The skies turned from red to blue. The air became clear. And with that clarity, the world changed. The Earth was no longer just a planet of fire and stone, it had become a living world. Beneath the brightening sky, carpets of microscopic life covered the ocean floors. Stromatolites, layered towers built by colonies of tiny cyanobacteria, rose from the shallow seas, exhaling oxygen into the growing atmosphere. For the first time, light touched a living surface and reflected back into space. The Earth glowed with color. For more than 1 billion years, life remained small. It had no eyes, no thoughts, no bones, or leaves. Yet it was everywhere. The oceans became vast laboratories of evolution. Cells learned to communicate, to share nutrients, even to merge. Inside some, smaller organisms took shelter, trading protection for energy. These tiny partnerships would one day become the mitochondria and chloroplasts inside every plant and animal cell. Life was learning cooperation, the quiet foundation of complexity. The planet itself responded to these changes. Oxygen reacted with iron in the oceans, forming rust that sank to the seafloor, painting the rocks in red and orange layers that can still be seen today. The air grew cooler and thinner, ice spread across the poles. The first great glaciations began, testing life's endurance. But life adapted, hiding in the warmth of the deep oceans, waiting patiently for the ice to retreat. It always found a way. As time flowed on, evolution continued its slow, relentless work. Cells developed stronger walls, more efficient ways to use energy, more precise ways to copy their genetic code. The simple chemistry of survival gave rise to complexity, and with it came a kind of memory not in thoughts, but in patterns. Each new generation carried with it the lessons of the last. The blueprint of life grew richer, more intricate. If you could have stood beside those ancient seas, you would have seen no movement, no creatures, only water shimmering beneath a strange sky. But within that stillness, the oceans were alive with invisible cities of microbes. Each drop of water held countless tiny lives, dividing, merging, adapting. The surface of the planet was a thin veil of green and blue, fragile yet unstoppable. And then, in the deep and secret places of the ocean, life began to dream of more. Some cells learned to form chains, to link together for strength and stability. Others began to specialize, one part for movement, another for feeding, another for sensing the world. These experiments were the beginning of multicellular life. From this quiet union, complexity bloomed once again. The future was calling, though there were still eons to pass before it would be answered. The Earth's heartbeat slowed as she aged. Her molten core still glowed, her magnetic field still shielded her from the harsh solar winds, and her moon continued to pull the tides in a timeless dance. The air was fresh now, rich with oxygen, and the seas sparkled with sunlight. Every condition was in place for something extraordinary. Evolution had laid its groundwork, chemistry had written its laws. Now, the world waited. The first chapter of life's story was complete. From dust and darkness had come water and light, from chaos had come order, and from simple molecules had come the whisper of persistence. The oceans sighed beneath the stars, and deep within them, the smallest living things carried the memory of creation within their fragile forms. The universe had taken its first quiet breath through them. Billions of years had passed since the first spark of formation, yet the journey had only just begun. The world was ready for its next transformation, the rise of creatures that could move, see, and feel. But for now, the earth rested in her blue stillness, breathing softly beneath the warmth of her sun. The oceans had carried life in their quiet embrace for billions of years, but now, something new began to stir beneath their shimmering surface. Life, once limited to the scale of the invisible, started to grow in shape and imagination. The single cells that had once floated freely began to link together, forming partnerships that changed everything. One cell became two, then many, each learning a different task. Some gathered energy, some sensed the world around them, some built structure and strength. These were the first multicellular organisms, and with them, life discovered the art of cooperation. In the dim light of the Precambrian seas, colonies of these new creatures blanketed the ocean floor like living carpets. They pulsed softly, moved with purpose, and responded to the touch of water and light. There were no predators yet, no fear, no struggle, only a slow unfolding of possibility. The planet was patient. For nearly 3 billion years, life had learned simplicity. Now, it began to experiment with beauty. Then, around 540 million years ago, the Earth entered a new dream, the Cambrian explosion, a time when life burst into color and form with breathtaking speed. In a geological instant, the oceans filled with creatures of every kind, soft, spiny, shelled, and strange. Eyes appeared for the first time, shimmering orbs that could detect movement and light. Jaws followed soon after. Where once there had been calm, now there was motion, and with motion came hunger. The first ecosystems were born, predators and prey, hunters and the hunted. Imagine those seas, forests of coral rising like cathedrals, the floors alive with trilobites, small, armored creatures that scuttled across the sand. Above them swam early fish with boneless bodies, darting through schools of plankton. Worms tunneled through the mud, tiny crabs filtered food from the currents, and jellyfish drifted like floating glass lanterns. The once silent oceans had become a living symphony of movement and light. The Earth's continents, still shifting and restless, drifted and collided, shaping the face of the planet. Volcanoes rose, mountains grew, and the climate changed again and again. But life adapted, flowing like water into every new space the Earth offered. Some creatures developed hard shells for protection, others learned to swim faster, to see farther, to hide in plain sight. Every adaptation wrote a new line in the story of evolution. Plants, too, began their great journey. From humble algae clinging to rocks, green life crept onto land, spreading across the damp edges of continents. Tiny mosses and liverworts took hold in the wet soil, drawing nourishment from sunlight and rain. They were the pioneers of the land, and they transformed it. Their roots broke the rocks into soil, their leaves captured carbon from the air, and slowly, the grey world turned green. With plants came new breath. The air thickened with plants came new breath. The air thickened with oxygen, filling the atmosphere with the scent of life. The skies grew brighter, and rain fell softer, nourishing the spreading forests. Insects followed soon after, delicate, winged travelers that pollinated flowers and carried seeds across vast distances. The land, once barren and lifeless, had become a tapestry of growth and motion. But life is never still. With abundance came change, and with change came conflict. Some creatures grew larger, stronger, hungrier. Amphibians emerged from the water, dragging themselves onto land with limbs strong enough to bear their weight. They lived between two worlds, water and earth, and became the ancestors of reptiles, birds, and mammals to come. Forests thickened, rivers wound through valleys, and the earth's heartbeat quickened once more. Then came the age of giants, the Paleozoic forests and the great reptiles. Massive trees reached toward the heavens, their roots deep in the damp earth, while dragonflies with wings the size of eagles filled the skies. In the swamps below, amphibians and lizard-like creatures thrived. Evolution was painting with broad strokes now, creating shapes and sizes the world had never seen. But time, even in its endless patience, brings change to all things. The continents collided again, forming the supercontinent Pangaea, and with its birth came drought, volcanic fury, and extinction. Yet from the ashes of each catastrophe, life found a new form, a new way to endure. The reptiles that survived grew stronger, harder, and more adaptable. They learned to lay eggs on land, to conserve water, to move with grace and speed. From their lineages would one day come dinosaurs, being so vast and powerful that they would rule the earth for more than 160 million years. Still, the story was not only of dominance, but of resilience. Beneath the feet of those towering beasts, smaller creatures scurried, tiny mammals, warm-blooded and watchful, living in the shadows. They waited through the ages, surviving every change that came. The world turned, ages passed, and the balance of life shifted again and again. As the earth continued to evolve, oceans rose and fell, mountains crumbled and grew anew, and the winds carried seeds across continents. Every storm, every fire, every birth and death was part of the same eternal rhythm. Life had become a tapestry woven with countless threads, each fragile, yet together unbreakable. By now, the earth had known many faces, ice and flame, silence and song, and life had filled every possible corner of it. From the deepest trenches of the sea to the highest peaks, from scorching deserts to frozen plains, living things thrived. The planet was no longer just a world, it was a living system, breathing, cycling, and evolving. And beneath the same stars that had watched its birth, the earth glowed with the colors of life, blue oceans, green forests, golden plains. The long silence of creation was gone, replaced by the hum of being. Yet, hidden in that hum, a new possibility was forming. For among all these forms of life, one lineage carried a spark unlike any other, the spark of curiosity, memory, and thought. The stage was ready for the next great awakening, the rise of intelligence, of awareness, of beings who would look at the stars and ask where they came from. But before that dawn, the earth rested once again, its ancient pulse steady beneath the sky, carrying within it the memory of everything that had ever lived. The age of giants came to an end in fire and darkness. 6 million years ago, the earth trembled beneath the impact of a wandering stone from space, a massive asteroid, falling from the heavens with the force of 1,000 suns. In a single day, the world of the dinosaurs ended. The skies darkened, the forests burned, and the sunlight vanished for years. But even in that silence, the story of life did not stop, it merely changed its form. From the shadows left behind by the giants, small creatures stirred. They were warm-blooded, soft-furred, curious, and quick. They hid in burrows and trees, waiting, watching. When the light returned, they came out to reclaim a world reborn. These were the mammals, the quiet heirs to an empty earth. They spread across the land, through forests and plains, learning to adapt to heat, to cold, to night and day. Some grew large again, elephants, whales, and bears, while others stayed small, quick, and clever. Among them, one branch of life began to change in extraordinary ways. They were the primates, creatures of vision and touch, with hands made for grasping and minds shaped by curiosity. They lived in trees at first, leaping through branches under golden light, feeding on fruits and leaves, raising their young in families that looked after one another. Their eyes faced forward, giving them depth and focus. In time, their world would widen far beyond the forest canopy. Millions of years passed, and the earth continued its endless rhythm of creation and renewal. The continents drifted apart once more, mountains rose, rivers carved new paths, and ice returned again and again in long, glacial winters. Through all of this, life endured. In the forests of Africa, the primates changed still further. Some began to stand upright, their spines straightening beneath the weight of the sky. They walked first through the trees, then upon the open grasslands, their gaze lifted to the horizon. These were the first hominins, our distant ancestors, fragile, curious beings who carried within them the ancient rhythm of survival. They learned to use tools, to crack bones, to shape stone, to cut and to build. Their hands, once made for climbing, became instruments of creation. With each spark struck from flint, a new idea was born: control over fire, warmth through the night, the power to cook, to forge, to imagine. Around those fires, under the wide African sky, something else began to glow, the light of awareness. They began to look at the stars above them and wonder. As millennia passed, these early humans spread across the earth. They followed rivers and coastlines, crossed mountains and deserts, and sailed upon unknown seas. Wherever they went, they carried their stories. They painted the walls of caves with images of animals and spirits, hands pressed against stone as if to leave a mark that time itself could not erase. They carved symbols, sang to the moon, buried their dead with flowers and tools. The spark of self-awareness had ignited into the fire of culture. From simple beginnings came language, a miracle of sound and meaning that allowed thought to be shared, remembered, and shaped. Words built families, families became tribes, and tribes became civilizations. People learned to plant seeds, to tame animals, to build homes from earth and stone. Villages grew into cities, cities into empires. The once wild world became shaped by human hands. The air filled with the smoke of cooking fires, the hum of life, the echo of songs carried through the valleys. And yet, for all their progress, humans never stopped looking back to the stars, to the heavens, to the questions that had begun at the edge of the ocean's tide. They wondered where they came from, and what lay beyond. They told stories of creation, of gods and beginnings, of light emerging from darkness. They built temples, wrote poetry, and measured the skies, not knowing that in their search for meaning, they were echoing the same forces that had once formed the first molecules in the sea. The universe had, in its own way, learned to remember itself. As the ages passed, humanity's presence grew ever stronger. They built monuments of stone, mapped the stars, sailed the oceans, and reached across continents. Empires rose and fell like waves upon the shore. Each generation added its own chapter to the long story of Earth, of love and war, of creation and loss, of endless curiosity. Through it all, the same sun that had once shone over molten rock now shone upon cities, forests, and the faces of people who could finally understand its warmth. Science, too, became a form of wonder. Humanity began to uncover the truths of the past, to read the record written in stone and bone, to trace the story of life from its simplest beginnings to the present. They learned that every atom in their bodies was once part of a star, that the oxygen they breathed came from ancient oceans, that the same chemical spark that gave birth to the first cells still flickered in their blood. The cosmos was no longer a mystery apart, it was a home. And even now, as night falls once more upon the turning world, the story continues. The earth still spins beneath the stars, her oceans still breathe, her mountains still rise and crumble. Life still blooms in uncountable forms, from the depths of the sea to the edge of the sky. And humanity, fragile and bright, continues to wonder, to build, to dream. When we gaze upward at the stars, we are not merely looking at distant suns, we are looking back at the beginning of ourselves. Every shimmer of starlight carries the memory of creation, every heartbeat echoes the rhythm of that first rain upon molten stone. The universe has traveled through fire and water, through chaos and order, through silence and song, to reach this very moment through you. So as you close your eyes and drift into sleep, remember, you are not separate from the earth or the stars. You are made of the same ancient dust that once swirled in the cosmic dark, the same light that once illuminated the newborn sky. The story of life is still being written through every breath you take. And as the world turns gently beneath you tonight, the universe dreams on through oceans, through forests, through you. Milky Way sparkles.